Would you bow with me for a moment of prayer? Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for thy rich blessings. We thank thee for that which thou hast done for us. We thank thee for the blessings of this day, a day when we can think of thee and come together to learn, to discuss, to recognize how much we can do for thee. I pray, Lord, for thy Spirit to be with us in class here and to be with the children who are in classes. Please be with those who are leaving today and guide and protect each of us. May we have thy Spirit. May we do thy will, I pray. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. No confession this day from my part, but I will tell you that every day is a test. Time for a test. There's a blank sheet in front of you, this whiteboard. You're not getting a list right now. Who will stand and share in order the names of the books of the Book of Mormon, the New Testament, or the Old Testament? Give you a choice. Who's brave? Who can do one of those? Did I see a hand? Yes. Would you stand, please? There's a microphone right there beside you. Maybe we can get it hot. You're going to just say them, yes. In order, just go right down the line. Which one are you doing? Are you doing all of them?
No, I'm just doing the Book of Mormon ones.
Okay.
Is this on?
We'll see.
Can you hear me? I am talking. Am I good? Am I good? Am I good? It's on.
Okay, now
Maybe.
try.
Okay, there we
There you go.
Okay. Nephi, Jacob, Enos, Jared, Omni, Mormon, Messiah, Alma, Helaman, Nephi, Mormon, Ether, Moroni.
Thank you very much. Good job. Okay, chance for somebody else. You get Old Testament or New Testament. Which one do you want? Do the New Testament. Come on up. I appreciate the bravery with which you do this.
Because I have a song that, because my song or whatever, I learned it when I was a kid, is different than this one or whatever, but it still gets the job done.
You know, you sound like one of the children we had in school years ago. I can't say the everlasting covenant, but I can sing it. Go ahead and sing your song.
Okay. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts and letters to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus and Philemon, Hebrews and the book of James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation.
Thank you very much. Okay. You know, that will, if you get that in your mind, that will serve you well all of your lives. Okay, looking for a volunteer for the Old Testament. I'm still looking for a volunteer for the Old Testament. How about half of the Old Testament? Can you do the first half? How about the first 5 books? That's a start. How about the first, say, 15? Okay, tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go, the Old Testament too. Thank you. Good job.
Well, and so the song, so the only thing, the song then also includes the Song of Solomon. So I have to sing it, otherwise I'll mess it all up.
Oh, he's one of these Pentecostal guys. He's one of these
otherwise
guys.
it'll mess it all up. So
That's okay, go ahead.
So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st Kings, 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Ezra, Nehemiah, Jonah, Esther, Psalm, oh my gosh, well,
You're in the right
did I
neck
get
of the
15? Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Jonah, Obadiah, or no, that's not right. Wait.
Go back to Joel and pick up the
Okay,
other four.
Joel, Amos. Yeah, okay, hold up. Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Jonah. No. Dude, I'm lost. All right,
Thank you so much.
I'll work on it.
Okay. Tomorrow, there ought to be 10 of you who are ready to jump up and do any one of these three. The next day is Friday. Can I, what? I think so. I'll get hung up with something about the same place he did. Let's see. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Whoops. I think Ruth's in there somewhere. Then 1st and 2nd Samuel. No, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Do we get to Esther? Is she in there next? Oh, Ezra and Nehemiah. Thank you. And then Esther. I want to go to Psalms. There's another one there. I can't do it. Okay. Tomorrow, I'll do it. Okay. Thank you very much. Dee?
Well, he's got a master's and I don't, but I know the books. You take what you can get, right?
I could sing it.
Well, no, you're
I could sing it when I was younger. Okay.
He was concerned because he said they were right in front of him. So I said, who's most important for us? I can come to this way. There we go. It's more centered this way. This is the strangest tripod I've ever worked with. Okay, here we're gonna go. Genesis, Exodus, ready?
Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, and the book of Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes.
Wait a minute. Listen.
Proverbs, Ecclesiastes.
This is the bouncing ball here. Watch the hand if you can. I know it's your one eye is on the words, one eye is on me, and whatever, you know.
Proverbs, ready? Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, then comes Malachi.
Okay, very good. Very good. Now we'll do a quickie on the New Testament books, and we'll get on with things. And it is easier. Okay. Remember?
La da 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 da, la da 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 da.
Okay, let me show you a little trick. Down where it gets to Galatians, I always had a trouble with Galatians. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, too many shuns in there. And I made up a little word using the first letter of each of those words except for Colossians. I used the word GEPCO, G-E-P-C-O. Now it's not Geico, it's GEPCO. And that's what I remembered. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. That's what I have to do. I have to do tricks to make, you know, the old mind is not what it used to be, and the young mind never was either. So, okay. All right, Matthew, ready?
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st Timothy, 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, and James, 1st Peter, 2nd Peter, 3 John's, Jude, and Revelation.
Very good. And for those of you who do Philemon or Philemon or something, I'm sorry, you just take your pick. Do whatever, you know. We don't know really how we pronounce some of them. Thank you.
What she said about words is a very important thing, because you get somebody who makes a man an offender for an S or a word or whatever else. I'm going to do that right now. We had a friend here in the area who didn't know the name Alma. He knew Alma. And Nephi is another guy. Years ago, we heard a testimony of a professor from BYU who told about when he was younger, he went to seminary. Now, not a seminary like to become a professor or a theologian, but the Mormons have what they call seminary that starts out first thing in the morning, usually in a building close to the school. They go there for an hour or so and then go to school. Okay, that's great. We should do the same thing. We should be teaching our children for an hour or so before they go to school. Probably an hour or two after they get home, too. And he said in seminary they had to read the Book of Mormon. And he didn't really want to read the Book of Mormon. But his parents had the records. Back in the old days, boys and girls, they had a round thing that was a very thin disc. It was called a record. I understand they're making a comeback. You might see them sometime. We've had some copies of those before. They're gold. A gold plastic record. A bunch of them. What would they look like? Gold plates, can you believe? Okay, I think they were probably recorded at 16 2/3 RPM. And so he heard, I, Nephi, having been born. That's going to take forever. So he jacked it up to 33. I, Nephi, having been born of, not enough. What's next? 45. I, Nephi, having been born of goodly. And he went to 78 probably. He said he got into class and somebody asked in the class, the teacher asked, well, what did you think about Alma? And he said, Alma. Oh, Alma. He said he was the only person who ever heard the Book of Mormon read by Alvin and the Chipmunks. Now, for some reason, that has stayed with me for years. I heard this 10 years ago or so. We have become friends of Richard Moore since then. And maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, he was in the Independence area, he and his wife. We had dinner together. I invited him to come out to our little branch for prayer service a night or two later. And I was a little bit surprised when he came, but that was fine. Dee was sitting in the second row where she always sits. She pays extra for that seat. And I was in charge. I said, oh, Richard and Lanny, come on up. You can sit beside Dee. They've known her for years. They sat there. Prayer service sometimes, it's kind of like it is here sometimes. You get 4 people who offer their prayers, you know, the designated prayers or something. And then it stops. And maybe 1 or 2 people offer testimonies and it stops again. And so we still had 20 minutes to go or something. And I said, we have some friends here from Provo, Utah. Richard or Lanny, would you like to share your testimony? Mormon women traditionally do not speak when their husbands are there. They yield to the husband. When they're alone, they speak lots. Richard stood, turned around, faced the congregation, and shared his testimony of the Book of Mormon. The question I would ask you is, what is your testimony of the Book of Mormon, and could you do that in 5 minutes or 10 or something in a way that would interest and edify someone else? One of the scriptures that we had heard just very briefly, I think, and I saw it on somebody's T-shirt last night, is from Luke 22:32. Jesus is talking to Peter, and he's saying basically that Satan desires you, and he's out to get you. And when you are converted, what? Strengthen your brethren. When you are converted, strengthen your brethren. That's your job. When you are converted, strengthen your brethren. You can say, oh, I was converted years ago. Good. What fruit has been born in those years? Well, I haven't really quite been converted yet, but I'm working on it. That may be where some of us feel. Then one of the proofs of that pudding is to strengthen your brethren. I would suggest that if we are not strengthening our brethren, then maybe we have not been converted as we should be. I thought earlier this morning about this testimony, this idea about being, praying for others, but also about the more righteous. Remember in the Book of Mormon, when Christ comes, 3rd Nephi chapter 5, Christ is coming, he says, it describes the people as having been the more righteous, and then later on he calls them the more righteous. And he also then tells them later that they had need to repent. They have not arrived yet. They are the more righteous above others, maybe. So I thought about the story about the guys who were tenting somewhere, and they saw a lion, and the lion was coming toward them, pacing toward them. And one guy was very quickly lacing up his shoes so he could run. And his friend said, you can't outrun that lion. He said, I don't have to, I just have to outrun you. Now that's not preferring your brother, I know, or lion breakfast or something, but sometimes we get the idea that we're a little bit better than somebody else, and that's good enough. We're better than the guys who want to quote Song of Solomon, just for example, or whatever, because we think that we have more of the truth. We do. What are we doing with it? Okay? So maybe looking at the more righteous from the time that Jesus met those at Bountiful, we can say they had the possibility, they had the opportunity to develop that more righteous status into something good, not to compare yourself with your buddy who's a slow runner, but compare yourself to Christ who can run with the speed of light. Okay? I'd like to share a quick testimony from Barrett Eliason. Barrett was pastor of the Sanilac Restoration Branch for years, old farmer in Michigan, and he shared last week a testimony of snow. You heard John say that you get a little bit of snow up here. Well, yeah, you get a little bit of snow, and sometimes it comes kind of fast and furious. Barrett had to take a cow to market. He had to take it the next day. That night it snowed, about 6 inches. And he said, back in those old days, 1957 if I recall, he said he did not have a truck to carry that cow in. He had a trailer behind a Ford car. Can you imagine that? Taking the cow to market, he said, was not really a problem because there was plenty of weight on the rear wheels of the car, rear-wheel drive, okay? Plenty of weight on the rear wheels, and that was fine. But coming home, he didn't have that weight on the rear tires. The trailer evidently did not have enough weight on the rear axle there, and he was a little bit concerned about making it up a hill, especially one hill that he had to go up with a snowy highway. And partway up the hill, he saw a car off at the edge of the road with a flat tire. Normally, he would have stopped to help the person. He said, I wasn't going to stop that day. And I heard a voice say, stop. Where would that voice come from? And he argued with the Lord. I can't stop. If I stop, I'll never get started again. I've got to keep up steam to make it up this hill. And he heard the voice say, stop. And he said again, he gave the reasons why he couldn't stop. And I think all this is probably taking place in a lot less time than it takes to tell about it. And he heard very forcefully and very loudly, "Stop." And he stopped and helped the gentleman not only change his tire, but he said the gentleman that had the flat tire was explaining to him that his wife was in the hospital. He just got the word that she was terminal. He's distraught. He's going home to tell his family. And he, maybe like the experience that Chris shared, wasn't really a believer. And Barron said, I was a young priesthood member, either a deacon or a teacher, but I was able to help him a little bit. And we got the tire changed. And then I thought, oh boy, how are we going to get out of here? And he said the tire he put on was smoother than it should have been, and maybe one of the drive wheels. He said, I prayed that we would get out of there. We drove out, both his vehicle and mine, as if the pavement were bare, although it had several inches of snow on it. God provides, especially if he puts us into a situation. I know the phrase, if God, help me here, if God brings you to it, there we go, he will help you through it, okay? So to and through, very interesting. We're talking about words a little bit. Somebody helped me. Dee said, well, I think it's such and such, and it wasn't. There is a hymn that has the word lead, L-E-A-D, that is often pronounced led when we sing it. And if you can think of what it is, we'll come back and see what it is. But I want to say it's lead by Revelation's light, but I'm not sure that's the phrase. It is. It's not in this blue hymnal? Okay, because we sing it every once in a while, and people sing led by Revelation's light. How do you spell led as a verb? L-E-D. What's L-E-A-D? It's lead, the present tense, or as lead, it is metal, like a bullet or something made out of lead, okay? So we mispronounced that word. Many of us mispronounced a word last night in hymn number 158. Would you open up hymn number 158, please? What's the word, Lisa? It's A.
It rhymes with day.
Okay, take a look at hymn number 158. This is one that there are 3 or 4 places in the hymnal where it catches you unaware. Well, since it happens to be in the refrain, the first time you can say, well, I blew it. But the second time and the third time and maybe the fourth time, you've got to say, oh, it's really A instead of I. What does I mean? Yes. What does A mean? Ever or forever, okay? It's the same spelling, 2 different pronunciations, 2 different words completely, like lead and led, okay? So when you get to this one, you sing forever and I, then it has to be the Y, because it rhymes. And Y is not the word you want. You're not English. You're not a good I might Australian, okay? So to rhyme with way, it has to be A, and it makes more sense there. Forever and yes doesn't really make a lot of sense. Forever and ever makes a little bit more sense. Now, the fact that we sang it wrong last night is not a biggie, but if we sing it again tonight, you'll see that and say, oops, I missed it the first time through, but I'll catch it from then on, okay? Some of you did not get a sheet. Hello. I hear a voice in the wilderness.
You mentioned several ways to pronounce it. Which way are you asking to pronounce it in this hymn?
In that hymn, it rhymes with way, so it is really A. Good. But all your friends said I. Some of your friends said I. Okay. We have a sheet that says something like what man wants and what God wants. And a few of you did not get that sheet, and you're not going to if I don't find any more here. But there we go. How many of you did not have that sheet available when you were looking at it or thinking about it? Who would want one today? Not somebody who already has 3 of them, but there we go. else needs one. Okay? Tell you what, Chris, you hold these. If somebody else needs one, you give them, okay? We'll see if I kept one for myself now. Yeah, okay. I have another paper that's like this I'm not going to give you, but it is somewhat the same kind of thing. And let me see if I can find it here. It really says, what's our response to this kind of thing? If we know what God wants us to do, then how do we respond? How do we react? And one of the reactions to such a thing as forgive all men, or pray for those who despitefully use you, or whatever, one of the responses is, no way, I'm not going to do that. Another response is, I already do this, I'm okay, I've got that one down. Another one is, well, I really want to be obedient, but I haven't been quite yet. Another one is, I really should. Another one is, what's it mean? And here are some suggestions. Have no other gods before me. How many of you already have got that one taken care of? Have no other gods before me. Oh, I don't see a lot of hands up. I was expecting everybody's hand to be up on that one. Okay. How about don't take the name of the Lord in vain? How many of you have got that one taken care of? You don't have to worry about that one every day. In school, sometimes we would hear children pray in the morning. Maybe they'd offer a blessing on the food. They'd forget about the food, but they pray for mommy and daddy and kitty and whatever. But they would often say, and God, help us so we don't fight today. Well, they didn't fight yesterday. They're not going to fight again today. They're not fighters. But they've got one out of the way. See, they can say, well, help us not do what we don't already do. It's kind of like giving up whiskey for Lent. If you don't drink whiskey, you can give it up pretty easily, okay? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. How many of you have got that one taken care of? We sort of did one time when we came with our school group going up to, let's see, we went from about here, not quite here, to North Platte, and then went north to the Black Hills, and we stayed overnight in North Platte, had church there Sunday, and as we were leaving the city, or probably got out of the city, we realized we didn't have much gas in our tanks. This was back 15 years ago, or 20 years ago maybe, and every little podunk gas station was closed on Sunday. Praise the Lord. Fantastic. It wasn't good for us, but it was a learning experience for us, and we should have all taken care of that beforehand. I mentioned pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. How many of you say, no way, I'm not going to do that. I've got somebody I just can't stand. You wouldn't admit that if you wouldn't raise your hand as, oh, Hattie did, but she's really just fixing her hair, right? Okay. We did the same thing in class the other day. Somebody raised his hand, and he wasn't really raising his hand. He was just kind of scratching his, yeah, right. Give thanks in all things. Yeah, I do that part of the time. All things doesn't allow for part of the time. Okay. Confess your faults one to another. Yeah, I'll do that sometimes. So this sheet is kind of interesting. I don't have copies of it for everybody, but you get the idea. Let me just read 2 or 3 more. Do not spend money for things of no worth. Do not idle away your time. Consecrate your talents and abilities. Be cheerful in your warfare. We talked about that yesterday. Do not become weary of good works. Love your wife or your husband with all your heart. That's a toughie, because my wife already said I'm number 2 or number 3 or so, because God's number 1. She's giving all her heart to him. She can't give it to me. Work that one out. Avoid the use of tobacco and strong drinks. Take sleep in the hours set apart by God. That's about midnight to something, right? Maybe a little earlier. Meet together oft. Abstain from all appearance of evil. These are commandments that have blessings that are attached to them. We're going to talk a little bit about blessings and commandments before long. Let's go back to this paper now that you all have what man wants and what God wants. We're going to go through 3 or 4 or 5 more of these today if we can do it. If we do it now, we'll get it done. Let's go to number 8. To get even. Man wants to get even. God says to forgive. Is there any problem there at all? Does anybody have a little bit of a bone in your body that says, I just like to get even? Many people do, and they don't admit it. And so if that is my case or yours, I understand. Let's go to number 9, to speak and to listen. God says, be still and know that I am God. He doesn't say keep talking all the time. That's my job, okay? But it's your job too if you have something you need to say and need to get it to us. But what? Who's got a hand? Where? Ted, go for it.
I mean, I think among a reasonable group of people to get even is man's way of doing it, but the world has become where it's get retribution, not get even.
Okay, get retribution. How many of you live in the Kansas City area? How many of you see Kansas City television once in a while? Do you ever see an ad or two from a lawyer who promises that if you will get him, he will get you what you deserve, or something? He will not only get justice, but he'll get compensation beyond that, and sometimes it's like $1 million or something like that. Wow, what a deal. Okay, thank you. I would like to get even with some of the flies around here. I would like that. As a matter of fact, who had the fly swatter yesterday? Leona, where are you? She had the fly swatter. If she'd just stand right here and just swat them every once in a while, you'd have a lot of fun. Let's go down to number 11. Fancy things, plain things. There are other uses of this, but fancy things, maybe in clothing, maybe something a little bit nicer than some others. We went through a dress code problem at Hope Christian School, and it was kind of interesting. They tried to define a dress code in terms of what you could not wear. And every year there was something different that came up, and so if you said parachute pants, people go, what are parachute pants? Okay? Or what such and such. We tried to define in terms of what you couldn't use. And finally they came up with a dress code that was very simple. Polo shirts for guys and gals, Docker type pants for guys and gals. Everybody kind of fit in the same mold. You couldn't tell the rich ones from the poor ones or whatever. Until one girl came to school in the middle of the year and showed the girls that you could put darts in those polo shirts in the right places, and they didn't look like polo shirts anymore. Yeah. Fancy things, or look at me, or how about the shorts or whatever else that across the derriere it says pink or whatever. What does it say? Look at me. Look at me. Here I am. Yeah. And we like to have that. That's man's way. God's way is more in plainness, in modesty. There are a couple scriptures that talk about this, and they're listed here. Not get attention. Not looking for attention. Yeah. Yes. No, you don't get a mic. Come right over here.
It's awfully easy to just say, well, you need to be modest, or something else.
But most people have differing ideas about what modesty is or anything else. And so it's so easy to just blanket your rules or whatever. My solution is, I think we need to have a talk with God personally and ask him, what pleases you, Lord? How should I dress? Or how should I eat? Or when should I take my sleep? Or that kind of thing. Because you're not going to listen to some person standing up in front of you, maybe who is the opposite gender, who's trying to tell you how to wear makeup or wear your clothes. You need the Lord talking to you in no uncertain terms and telling you what's right in your heart. Otherwise, you're going to say, oh, that's just Paul, or that's just Joe talking. He doesn't know. What's he doing judging me? You know, that kind of thing. So for all of these things, it's not going to do just to have some elder or priest or teacher coming up to you and saying, you need to change your ways, little boy or little girl. You've got to have that communication with the Lord.
This is one we could spend a week on, probably trying to decide or define what is modesty. We did something for reunions down in central Missouri years ago. I haven't seen the same words being used recently, but it said something about modest dress, not to offend those who are trying to serve the Lord. It wasn't saying you've got to do such and such, but it said try not to offend those who are trying to serve. Rayland?
The rule of thumb that my family has always used, and it came from my grandparents, if Jesus was standing in front of you, how would you want to look? How would you want to act? And if we use that as a rule of thumb, that'll direct us in the right direction.
We've had what do you call it, a cliche kind of thing for years. WWJD, what would Jesus do? Or what would Jesus accept? Or what would Jesus want you to do, or whatever? Lisa? Did you, oh, I thought you had a mic in your hand. It'll just, okay. Yes. Come up here with that fly swatter. Okay. Somebody else is in here. Yes, Jerry?
We sing a song, They'll Know We're Christians by Our Love.
Mm-hmm.
And in central Missouri, when I'm out shopping, I run into, or I see, and I visit with sometimes, a lot of Mennonite and Amish ladies. And they are modestly dressed, but it's not ugly. And if they have a print, it's a new print. You know, it's a blue with flowers. And the friend might have blue with no flowers. And so they have a way of expressing their own personal taste without offending anybody. But you know who they are by their dress, and I admire them for that.
Good. Thank you. Over here to Tom. Can you get over that way, Chris? You can stand. He's going to stand for this. Okay.
A few years back, my wife and I had been on a trip out to the Salt Lake City area. And one of our things that we like to do is go around to the local colleges and see their campuses. So we drove down to BYU. And while we were there, it was interesting to me to see that the kids that were attending college there, and again, LDS, understand, but they didn't have the short shorts, they didn't have even shorts, they had well-dressed shirts, what have you. We went into the library bookstore, and up on the wall was a picture, a diagram with proper dress code according to the college for both boys and girls. And I thought, boy, this is tremendous. This is really good. So there are people out there that do adhere to it, and there are people out there that do instruct it. It was very refreshing.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's take a look at one or two more here, and then we're going to stop with this one and do something else. My wife asked me what exciting thing we're going to do today. I'm sorry, we've already done it, so no. If you're waiting for the exciting thing, hang on. We'll get there in a minute. Number 12, to be like others. We tried to make people like others by saying there's a dress code, you got to wear certain things, and you'll get along just fine in school. But the way of the world, it goes two different ways. You can want fancy things and be better than somebody else, or you can want to be just like everybody else and have these things that they have. We're back to what it says in the 6th chapter of Matthew about after all these things did the Gentiles seek, the things of this world, and God says heavenly things. There's a really neat scripture, I think it may be John 10:10, that talks about abundant life. We can have an abundant life here on this earth in spiritual things, and it doesn't have to be an abundant life in all these other things. There's another word that's used in the Book of Mormon often. I think it's 21 or 22 times maybe. The phrase is used, if you obey the commandments of God, you will prosper in the land. That's fantastic. And then sometimes it goes the other way and says, and if you do not obey the commandments, you will not prosper or you'll be cast out. Yesterday in class, we talked about casting somebody out because she wasn't obeying the rules of the game we were playing. Who's on? I heard her voice. Okay. Hi, Bruce. How are you? Okay. Let's do one other one here. 14, to be independent or to work together. We have a problem among branches who say we are independent restoration branches. We don't have to bow to anybody else. We don't have any leader but Jesus Christ. We do our own thing, and we don't want to associate with anyone else who isn't just like us. Guess what? Nobody else is just like us. And what it tends to mean is we don't associate with very many others. And it's easy to build walls between branches. Let me suggest that most of the building material we use for walls will also make bridges. You can use the same kind of structural steel, wood. Concrete blocks are not too good for most bridges, but you can use them for pilings or something and make bridges using those same things we build walls with. And let me back up a couple of weeks. Dee and I we've been blessed in many ways, and I just want to share this because we want the same blessings to come to you. If we were praying for our brothers, we would pray that you would be just like us. Oh no, we don't want that. We'd pray that you have some of the same experiences that we do. And at one of the reunions a week or two ago, I said, I've been very quiet, I've been listening to your class, I've been taking it in, but I need to say something finally. And it was the last day I was going to be there, I was going to leave right after that, so I thought, I can say it and run. I said, you're in the wrong place. You're in Michigan, you're a long ways from where God says you should be gathered in the center place. And because of that, you have this idea that you're all alone. And you should be somewhere where there are lots and lots of other people. Everett's a good example. Let me just catch that first, and I'll come back to you. Everett's a good example of going to reunion here and going to reunion at the Buckner reunion at Odessa Hills. The Buckner reunion had 160 people or so on the grounds. I had another 30, 40, 50 people drive in every night because it's only 20 miles or so from where those people live. And excellent ministry, and we would invite you and say, look for that reunion, or Central Missouri's, or something else. On the other hand, the Elders Conference had a reunion and conference. What do we see, 60 people, 80 people? Not very many. Downtown Independence. And so people pick and choose, I guess, as to what they want, what they can do, or whatever. And that's part of the problem. We have a group of 10 restoration branches in Central Missouri, and 4 times a year we have what we call all branch gatherings. The branches all close up and everybody comes together. When they count the number of people in these branches, 100 here, 50 here, and whatever else, we come up with a number of about 900 saints in these branches. When we have an all-branch gathering, whether it's for worship or whether it's for voting on members for committees to serve the people with reunions and so on, we have about 60 or 80 people show up. Where are the rest of them? They're home watching TV, or they're at the ball game, or they're somewhere else. And it's too bad. They chose not to be part of others. Why? this independence and working together hasn't quite grabbed them. They got the independent part, but they don't have the working together part. Everett, your turn.
Well, the idea of becoming independent, for me, we became independent of what was used to be the church. And we're working together to be that church. And from my standpoint, we of the Restoration is that church that Nephi saw in his vision, that we are the church of Jesus Christ, but we are few in number, which we are. We don't need to be independent of each other, but independent of what was once the church. That's
Good.
what I look at it.
That makes a difference. Thank you. There is a good scripture in the Book of Mormon, and you can tell me where it is somewhere, Alma, I think, and it says that they organized churches throughout the land, and they were all separate churches, but they were all one church. Yvonne?
Well, I've always been a believer that
Yeah, get that right close. Swallow that thing.
I've always been a believer that we should maintain our friendships even with the community of Christ, the people that we were members with, quite a while ago. And I'm so glad that we have through the years, because in the last few years I've been associated with their clothing. They have like a little clothing store in our town that they maintain, and I've gone there to help. And they call on me to help with various things, and I'm just so glad for that. I always want to be considered available to help, and not be just helping my church, and I feel that way about even working in the community with other churches, that it's really important for us to, nothing shows Christianity more than, just helping your fellow people in your community. And so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's kind of interesting. We tend to ignore people who have gone a different way than we have. If they've gone on one path and we've gone on another path, we say, well, and we write them off. We also think bad things about them, like, well, they can't believe such and such or whatever. Let me share this with you. Years ago, a priest in our congregation said, Paul, I feel it's my responsibility, I hope I won't step on somebody's toes here, but I may. I feel it's my responsibility to go to every family and tell them why women's ordination is not correct. I said, well, if you feel that's what you should do, go for it. He said, okay, I want you to go with me. And he said, and I've got an appointment for next Tuesday night with Sister so-and-so. Sister so-and-so happened to be an older lady in the branch, and her daughter was married to one of the apostles and was tied up with all the political things and whatever else going on within what we then called the institutional church. We were still part of that church, but we thought of ourselves as being somewhat independent, I guess. We went to the home, had a really nice visit. My job was saying, your turn, your turn, your turn, don't fight, that kind of thing. And the conversation lasted for about 20 or 30 minutes probably. He shared what he wanted to share. We stood up to leave, and he said, well, if you believe that, then you also don't believe this, and you such and such here, and you whatever else. And this dear sweet lady said, don't paint me with that paintbrush. Because I believe one thing doesn't automatically mean that I believe this or this or this or that. And we've had some really neat experiences not too long ago. Guys, listen to your wives. Let your wives pray. We sell a lot of books. We don't sell very many books to people in the community of Christ, but we do sell, we sell a lot, but not as many lot as we'd like. And maybe 6 months ago or so, Dee prayed that we would somehow have some inroads, some way to meet some needs of people within the community of Christ. Within about a week, a lady called. She's bought some books over the years, but not very many. She said, I want to come out and see your books. I really want to see what you have. We have a building that's more or less the size of this place here, filled with books, okay? Stacked up, they're on shelves. And I want to bring somebody with me. Okay. 2 ladies from the Community of Christ came out and looked at books. And came back to the house then. We have our newer books in the house rather than out where they might get destroyed or something. And I said, have you seen our new 3-in-1? And her immediate response was, I don't like a 3-in-1. I want 3 books I can pass. Good idea. We handed her a 3-in-1 sample. She opened it up on her lap, and she said, oh, this is nice. How much is it? Okay. So she bought a 3-in-1 before she left. And they walked out with each about $100 worth of books or so. You know, it was a decent day to put in an hour with them or something. Okay. And it's not about money, but that's just an idea. Within a week, a man called from somewhere in California. He was coming to visit his daughter in Kansas. Well, Kansas isn't that far from Missouri, so he was going to come see us. I'd like to come see your books. And he wanted 15 copies of an F. Henry Edwards book that they were going to use in class. I said, okay, I'll save the books for you. I ended up with just 15, I think, or 14, enough to supply his needs at least. He came to the house. He and his wife were looking at some other books. I showed them the 3-in-1. He said, oh, I want one of these. I want 2 of them. I want one for myself and one for my daughter. Okay, so he walked out with a bunch of books. Within the next week or 2, the gal who had come first and saw the book and said, oh, I like this, said, I need to come back, and I have 5 friends that want to come with me. And I think she actually brought 6 friends. Anyway, there were a whole bunch of older women. One of them said, I just came to get the 3-in-1s. I need one for each one of my grandchildren. She is a dear, sweet lady who used to live around the corner, like out where we live, around the corner is like 1.5 miles or 2 miles away. She used to work for Herald House. I would order 3-in-1s from Herald House back in the old days and have them delivered to the Temple bookstore where she worked. I would sign the paper for that, get the invoice, mail the check in or whatever. So I was buying 3-in-1s from her, and now she's buying 3-in-1s from us. It's a fantastic little game we play, okay? But these are people within the Community of Christ. And there are lots of them who believe the Book of Mormon. They maybe don't hear it taught where they go to church. They maybe hear it put down. But they're good people who, they're like us in many ways. There are a few minor little differences, and there are minor little differences between you and your neighbor right here. Those are some things we can overlook at times. John and then Judith. John?
Well, I thought I had something to say, but I was wondering how what you just shared with us fit into our lesson today. But
we're praying for those who need the prayers. Okay. We're praying for our neighbors.
Well, I'm reminded that when we're talking about some of these issues, we know that we're to live in the world but not of the world.
Okay.
And yet in the world we're exposed to all kinds of peoples or groups of peoples who are promoting rebellion against government, rebellion against control, rebellion against authority. And if Satan's not behind that, I'm not sure who is. Now, rebelling against criminal elements, I think that's worthy. We know that God is at work all the time, 24/7. But so is the adversary. And we have to be so careful what we let into our homes through any communication unit like television, because you see this all the time. And some of the things that are deadly are abortion. This nation is going to pay a terrible price because we're murdering babies.
Thank you. We like to badmouth television. Television is a terrible thing because it brings all this stuff into our home. But most of you have a little gadget in your hand that you can get anything you want, and your children can get anything they want, including especially those things you don't want. Okay? Yeah, they can dial up whatever, and you really have no control over that. We're back to the idea that we need to judge ourselves. We need to have limits, and we need to try to encourage our children to have those limits. Judith?
Okay, is this on? Yes. Okay, I have two things I want to say. First of all, I want to
I'm going to ask you to swallow that too. Get it just as close to you as you can.
Okay.
Good.
First of all, I want to say something in my defense. When I gave my testimony this morning, I made a statement that the Lord brought us back to independence and that that whole area of Oklahoma went remnant. I'm not against remnant. I don't want to say I'm against their belief. It's that we were not of the same exact persuasion. But all these years, you know, all of us have wanted to be back together under one unified head. And Paul put a thing on the Garland snack telling about Monday night and Book of Mormon. What would you call it, Paul? Book of Mormon. It's the COC thing on Monday nights.
You'd like me to tell about that now?
Pardon?
Do you want me to mention
I just
something
want you
about
to tell me what would we call that.
Okay, it's called Book of Mormon Perspectives.
Perspectives, okay. So I got Marcy to come over and set up the Zoom so I could watch it. And my heart just soared because I saw all of us there of different persuasions, but we all believed in one thing. We believed in the Book of Mormon. And it was the most wonderful joy in my heart because I saw us, we had one thing in common. We might have had some differences in beliefs, but we had that wonderful Book of Mormon in common. And here was Paul, and he was telling some things, and there was the people from the JCRB. I'm not sure, Paul, were there remnant there? I don't know that. But there were COC, and they were all expressing as if they were buddies and friends, you know, and open for each other. It was the most wonderful, wonderful thing. And people were there to share their persuasions, their thinking of the Book of Mormon. Wonderful stuff was going on there. I just want to say that was really wonderful for me.
I heard the word wonderful more than once, I think. I think it was probably wonderful. Thank you, Judith. Tom?
A couple of weeks back, we were at another reunion, and one of the priesthood members there said something I thought was very interesting. He does a lot of missionary work in Africa, and they were in a village, and they went to talk to the people and gather them, and there was a couple of ladies that showed up, and they sat down, and they were talking to them and you know, telling them about the church, and the one lady says, well, is that it? And you know, aren't you going to tell me that you know, I think Methodist or whatever, or that was what they were there previously. And she says, aren't you going to tell me my church is wrong? And he says, no, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm not going to tell you you're in the wrong church. What I'm going to tell you is that here's something that we have to offer, what we believe, and there's better things yet to come. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, because if we applied the same thing here in our own country, how often is not we would say to our brother in another congregation or another church, you know, you have something, you know, don't get me wrong, we're not here to condemn you. We're here to tell you about what else is available to you.
Thank you. Don't hesitate to be praying for those who once were part of the faith and who have, for one reason or another, either gone somewhere else or just kind of dropped out or is following a different leadership or whatever else. The time will come that we'll be much more together than we are now. Let me share a very brief testimony. You can buy this or not buy it. Check it out a little bit. I mentioned Christ coming to the New World and seeing those people who were gathered around the temple at Bountiful and knowing or saying that they were the more righteous. He said, I have come to put away the disputations that are among you, that there be not disputations as there have hitherto been. Wouldn't it be fantastic if Christ came today and said that same thing? Put away the disputations among you. The first thing he did then was really teach them how to baptize. And he told them exactly the words to use. Now, we have an English translation of what he said, and then we have another translation in the Doctrine and Covenants that's slightly different, and we argue about being commissioned by or having authority of, which mean the same thing. But he didn't say either one of those words because he didn't speak in English. But he told them how to baptize. He addressed 12 men and said, I give you authority. I'm going to tell you those people have already been baptized once before that. He is not going to give authority to those who have not already made a commitment. He served sacrament to them twice. He's not going to tell us not to serve those who are not baptized, and he's going to serve people who are not baptized. So I'm going to say they're baptized already. But then he has them baptize again. Nephi, it doesn't tell how Nephi is baptized, but it says that Nephi baptized the other 11, who I'm going to suggest are already baptized before. The Book of Mormon says in one place or two, and the Bible also says in one place, that only 100th part of what Jesus taught is included. 100th part means 1%. That means there are a few lines missing from our record. According to the Gospel of Paul, one line that is missing is Jesus saying, I don't care how you got here. Are you ready to make a commitment, a covenant directly with me? If you are, it's time to be baptized into my church. It's time to be baptized unto me. Doctrine and Covenants 20 says something about, you can say, baptism, if you're baptized 100 times, it avails you nothing. A new commandment I give unto you. And that new commandment should be directly with Christ. In today's vernacular, it doesn't matter if you were baptized by a woman in the XYZ church, or a prophet or an apostle in the remnant church or something else. Ultimately, it does matter because you've come to the point where you are you ready now to make a commitment directly with Christ? And some of us would say, like our Baptist friends or someone else, I've already been baptized once. I was baptized by Elder so-and-so back in 1844. I'm good. And we say, that's not good enough if you're a Baptist or something else. Once baptized doesn't get you in unless you're ready to make a commitment with authority, with those who have authority given by the Lord. Now, you can check that out and see if you tend to agree that these are baptized people already. I'm not going to fight you for it, but I'm saying that's something that has come to me that makes sense to me. Now, Dee and I are renegades. Besides having blessings here and there, we were at the Remnant Church Conference about, 5 weeks ago or so? Time flies. We're going to a JCRB conference in another 2 weeks. Good people who once were part of the same fellowship that we are. If there were a conference of the Community of Christ and they invited us to bring books, we would take books to them because they need them as much as anybody else does. And we would not try to look at points that are different between us. We would try to see those things that are similar where we can work together. It doesn't mean we feel comfortable with certain ordinances or some things, but we're certainly comfortable in meeting with them, talking with them. We don't think we're going to catch some terrible disease or whatever else because we're in the same building they're in or whatever. But there's hope for all of us if we can find some way to work together. That's where I'm coming from. You have a mic back here with somebody? Oh, we don't want to let him, no, go ahead. Who's got it? Yes, sir.
I believe it's Nephi that says they followed the law of Moses closely and as closely as they could. And I remember exactly the wordage, but like they're diligent to follow the law of Moses. Anyway, they didn't have the priesthood authority after the order of Melchizedek. They had the, after the order of Aaron, when Lehi and his family came to the Americas, that was the law of Moses and, the Aaronic priesthood. That was what they had at the time, ever since the time of Moses, when the priesthood was, the Melchizedek priesthood was taken from them until the time of Christ. It was just the Aaronic priesthood that remained. And so any baptisms that happened within that time, which included the Nephites, Lamanites, the people of the Americas, any baptisms that happened during that time were under the Aaronic authority.
And
so,
it's sort of like half baptisms, water, but not spirit? Maybe?
Basically. Although they did have the understanding of the celestial law, but they followed the Mosaic law as if it was celestial, because they had that level of understanding. But they didn't have the priesthood authority until Christ came and bestowed it upon them. And at that point, they had the celestial baptisms.
I think we would say the same thing today, wouldn't we? We would say that those in some other groups maybe do not have the full authority to operate as the Lord would have. And there are times that we also don't have that same full authority or freedom to act as we have or should, or as is God's plan. Okay, I'd like to do something else just for a plug. We've got a few minutes. Dee's going to have a class this afternoon in this room. It's going to be using an alpha and omega game, and you'll have some fun if you go in there with her. Tomorrow we'll do something else with scriptures in the afternoon if you want to join us at 2:30. I want to make a note about praying for the kingdom. About 10 years ago now, probably, time flies, a good friend down in Texas said, Paul, I want to find a way to get people together to pray for Zion. Judith, you're right. The Book of Mormon should be something that ties us together. Zion should be something that brings us together. It's a common goal. And what she wanted was something like, let's all meet at the temple lot first Saturday of each month or whatever and pray for the kingdom. I said, you're in Texas. You're not going to come to the temple lot once a month. In the wintertime, you're not going to get people to go out there. They want to take their shoes off if they're going to be on the temple lot. And they're not going to do that in the middle of the winter. Let's try doing it on the internet instead. Let's try doing it in a way that brings people together to do something. So what we did was set up a website. It's called prayforthekingdom. It's not Zion. It's Pray for the Kingdom. Because if you go on the internet, everything that's Zion has to do with Jerusalem. Okay? So we use the word kingdom. Pray for the Kingdom. It's a blogspot.com address. And what we set up was a time scheduling, 24 hours a day, and asked people to choose a 30-minute period to pray. And we put names in it. And it was really big. It wasn't really big enough, but it was really, it caught the attention of some people. And so there were names plastered in here, not entirely around the clock, but many times. I think our time was like 6 to 6:30. Well, when Dee and I got married, we decided to split that between the two of us, because neither one of us can pray for 30 minutes, but two of us together can go 15 minutes and 15 minutes, although she'll tell you, Paul sometimes peters out at 12 and a half minutes or something like, I've done prayed all I can pray, I can't do anything else. And thankfully, she'll go for the 18 minutes or whatever and make up for it. But praying for the kingdom is not just praying, God, we want Zion to come today. But it's, dear Lord, how can we be prepared so that when the Lord does come, we'll be ready? Can we have faith? Please help us this way. Please help others who have maybe differing views from what we have. Can we give of our substance? Can we be more ready and willing? Oh, willing is one of the words. What's the other word that goes with willing in Zion? The willing and blank will eat the good of the land of Zion in the last days. What's the O word? Obedient. We sometimes ignore that one. And so this is a chance for people to pool together. They never see each other. They never talk together maybe, but they're aware that there are other people praying at the same time for this thing we call the kingdom. It's a worthwhile thing. What Judith mentioned on Monday nights, Paul DeBarth, who was in the Community of Christ, set up this thing, or started getting it going anyway. He has invited some really strange people to take part in this Book of Mormon Perspectives. Dee and I have probably been on it 8 or 10 times maybe in the past several months. It's been going for a year or 2 or 3, and I kept getting notices about it and never had time to say, I'm going to devote an hour on Monday night to watching this. But one guy shared about Book of Mormon geography. You'll like this one. Ted, are you still here? Are you hiding? Okay, there. Book of Mormon geography. We like Mesoamerica because that's what we've been taught. But other people like a heartland theory, Michigan, Ohio, New York, as being the center of where everything in the Book of Mormon took place. This guy presented about 8 different locations, including Sri Lanka, Northern Africa, the Malay Peninsula, South America, some other ones that were kind of weird. He gave pros and cons on each one. And he didn't pick one as being, this has to be the way it is. We don't know where it was, particularly. We have a lot of clues. It may have been this river is really the Sidon River, the narrow neck may be such and whatever, and there are lots of good clues, but there's not a lot of agreement. And that's okay. So that was one of the presentations made one Monday night. Another one had to do with the Restored Covenant edition of the Book of Mormon, just telling what it was, what's in it, features that it has that are good, and maybe some things that people really like because of the poetry form and so on. Another night, a man told about in search of Lehi's trail through Arabia, going down the coast, following what the Book of Mormon says. We traveled in a southeasterly direction so far, and then we turned and went directly east and whatever, and he found, would you believe, a place of abundance, a place where in the desert, here are fruit trees and abundance of things like, you might call it bountiful or something like that. And now we're talking about 2,500 years after Lehi did. Has conditions changed? Has the condition changed? Has the weather pattern changed? I don't know. But it's interesting to do this. Judith, for your information, Ron Smith is on next week with the real Anthon transcript. There are different variations of what we think of as being the transcript that was shown to Martin Harris, shown by Martin Harris to the professors in New York City. We don't know. So Ron's going to tell us a little bit of something that he thinks he's known about, and that's fine. I'm scheduled for the next week, but I've been preempted, so I got to send another message out, Judith, saying I'm going to be on in September instead. A glitch came up with somebody else, and so I'm not going to be on the next week. I'm going to show Book of Mormon materials. We have a dearth of books that people don't even know exist, plus some information on the website and so on. Would you believe that in RLDS, among RLDS writers, there are presently available 100 titles of books about the Book of Mormon? Not just Book of Mormon this, Book of Mormon that, but a whole bunch of other books by writers over the last 150 years or so, and those books are all available. We've also produced some books that are really neat, including some things that have gone into the Community of Christ. Book of Mormon Blessings, which is back here on the table. A man got one. He's in the Community of Christ in Illinois. He said, send me 20 copies. I want to give one to every family in my branch. We sent him 20 copies. 2, 3 weeks later, he called back and said, I've given them all out. I need 6 more. I need 20 copies, 25 copies of Book of Mormon gems and settings. I want to give one to everybody in my branch. And a couple others have done that same kind of thing. This is getting into Community of Christ.
Did you tell him what his attitude was when we first started talking to him?
Okay.
He was losing his wife.
About his wife? Yeah. It's time to quit, but I'll tell you this. His name is Dale. When Dale first called, maybe 6 months, 8 months ago or so, he said, oh, Irma Lou passed away 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever. Oh, I am so sad. I'm so lonely. Irma Lou and I were married for 62 years or whatever. This guy is 88 or 90 years old. And I said, you know, you are a survivor. You are proof that there is life after death. In some families, when one spouse dies, the other one dies right along with them. And they give up, and they just can't do anything at all. He said, well, that's right. Over the next week or 2 or 3 or 4, he started sending out messages to all his friends. Something in the Book of Mormon that really grabbed him, that he really liked, and or a sermon that he had done 10 years ago or so. And he's been busy sending out messages and so on. He still remembers his wife, don't get me wrong. He still mentions her from time to time. But it's not like, woe is me. He's done something with his life, okay? And he's doing something with his life. If you didn't get the new Restoration Voice before you left home, he has an article in that Restoration Voice which you look at and you say, that's a really puny thing. The ABCs and listing a word like angel for A and blessing for B and Christ for C or whatever, and then picking out some scriptures that were really important to him and adding those in and saying, this is something that I've done that I can think about at night, or I can do this or that. And these are really meaningful to me. It's not like a highfalutin theological sermon of some kind, but it's a very simple thing that can give us an idea of what we can do. He sent messages to everybody he knew about the little Book of Mormon Blessings book, including his, quote, Mission Center president. Now, you and I don't know what Mission Center presidents are generally, but in the Community of Christ, they have them now. So she orders a book. Okay, and not only did she order a book, but we talked on the phone a little bit, and I said, I remember you from 1962 when I was working in the auditorium as an elevator operator during the World Conference, and you and 2 other girls who were about 12 or 13 bugged me all day long to take you to the 5th floor, take you down to the basement, take you to the 3rd floor, and whatever else. They were just cute as could be, and she said, that was me. We need to quit. We'll come back again tomorrow, and tomorrow will be that exciting thing. Who's that? Jerry?
I have a testimony I really need to share. And they're talking about these other groups, et cetera, et cetera. About a few years ago,
Get that
we
right
were
in front of
staying.
your face, right close.
A few years ago, we were on Oahu, staying with my daughter for a couple months. And the first thing we did was look for a restoration branch. There was none that we could find. We found the old COC, but right there near Waianae, where she lived, was the mission. And so we started attending there. Now, we had visited the main church 10 years before, so they kind of knew us. And so the first night we went to the mission, they were basically having a class. And a lot of these people are not Latter-day Saints, who never heard of the Book of Mormon, but these people are teaching them. And so they invited us to stay. And that very first night, we took part in their discussion, and we added our little bit of restoration philosophy, you know. And, okay, I got it. Anyway, we had some interesting conversations, but we were adding what we believed from the Restoration Branch, from the aspect of the church as it first was. And as we got ready to leave that night, Stephen Watanabe, who had been the pastor, was still a pastor, who's a Hawaiian, walked out with me. And of course, I was the last one out. I'd visited with everybody. And as we walked out, I said, Stephen, you know that back on the mainland, we belong to a restoration branch. And if you want us to stay and take part in your everything, we'll be glad to. And he says, we're glad to have you. And then he looked at me face on, just as close as he could get to my face. And he held my cheek in his hands, like in the Hawaiian style. And he said, but let me tell you this, someday we will all be together. And then he kissed me on the cheek, as the Hawaiians do. And I believe that someday, if we keep the door open, but if we slam that door, we'll never get some of those people back. We've got to keep the door open.
Thank you. I have 2 words on my paper that I did not mention before. I'll mention them right now and then go on. Planting seeds. Sometimes all we do is plant seeds. Would you bow with me? Dear Father in heaven, we thank thee for this day. We thank thee for thy rich blessings. We thank thee for the coolness in spite of the heat. We thank thee for thy spirit in spite of the things around the world that are going on around us. We thank thee, Lord, for that hope that we have of thy kingdom. We look forward to seeing the time when thy Son returns and chooses his jewels. May he find faith among his people, I pray, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.